Welcome the anointed ones. The scariest kind of storm is the one they didn't see coming. You see, in the world of psychology, there's a phenomenon called cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable mental chaos when your brain is forced to accept a truth it wasn't prepared for. Well, you just became the human embodiment of cognitive dissonance. One move from you and suddenly people who thought they had you figured out are sitting in the corner, mentally pacing like, wait, what just happened? It's not just that you shocked them, you rewired their entire mental map. The story they told themselves about you, gone. Their carefully curated opinion, shattered. You didn't just change the game. You made them question if they even understood the rules in the first place. And the funniest part? Some of them are pretending they're not bothered. But the way they're suddenly researching your every step, you'd think you just became their full-time job description. What you did wasn't predictable. It wasn't gradual. It was a lightning strike. And lightning doesn't politely knock before entering. It burns its signature into the ground so deep, people talk about it for years. So now let's unpack exactly why they weren't ready for what you just did, and why they're questioning everything they thought they knew about you. Number one, you didn't just win. You rewrote the conditions for victory. They expected you to aim for the finish line they built. They thought the only way you could win was by following the same narrow track they'd been running for years. But instead of sprinting toward the prize they dangled in front of you, you dismantled the entire definition of winning. You didn't just take the trophy. You made the trophy irrelevant. What unsettles them the most is that they didn't even see the shift happening until it was done. Their strategy was built on predictable patterns. If you take a certain step, they counter with a certain move. But when you stopped playing by their manual, every counter they prepared turned useless. You introduced a result they weren't trained to process. This isn't just about surprising them. You force them to accept that the very system they swore by has holes big enough to sink their credibility. Now they're in a mental scramble, replaying every interaction with you, wondering if they missed the signs that you were operating on an entirely different frequency. They can't decide if you're a genius, a threat, or both. But they know they'll never underestimate you again. Your move didn't just expose their lack of foresight. It made them painfully aware that their so-called expertise is tied to outdated conditions that crumble under pressure. The deeper sting for them is this: their authority was tied to defining the terms of success. If they controlled the criteria, they could control the outcome. But your win bypassed their approval, meaning their stamp of validation no longer matters. They can't gatekeep what they can't even measure. You've proven that the highest form of victory isn't beating them at their game. It's making their game obsolete. And now, every time they try to rebuild their position, they have to quietly consider how to prevent another move like yours. That's the kind of disruption they can't prepare for, because it doesn't operate inside the predictable box of competition. It comes from someone who understands that true power isn't handed over. It's claimed. That's why what you did has them unsettled. They didn't just lose to you. They lost the safety of believing they knew how the world worked. And there's no strategy manual that can save them from that. Number two, you proved they've been living in a manufactured reality. For the longest time, they operated in a comfortable version of reality, one that suited their ego, their control, and their worldview. It wasn't necessarily the truth, but it was convenient, and they believed it because it kept them safe from having to face uncomfortable facts. You just ripped the floor out from under that comfort. With one action, you exposed that the reality they'd been clinging to was manufactured, propped up by assumptions, hearsay, and illusions they never questioned. This hit harder than they expected because people rarely realize they're living in a bubble until something bursts it. And when it bursts, the shock isn't just about the new truth. It's about realizing how long they've been operating on false information. They're now confronted with the idea that not only were they wrong about you, But they were wrong about the systems, the people, and the beliefs they've been building their life around. That's not just unsettling, it's identity shattering. The hardest part for them is accepting that you didn't create the lie. You simply revealed it. That means the deception wasn't external anymore. It's now in their own reflection. They have to grapple with the fact that they willingly bought into a version of events that fit their comfort zone, even when signs pointed otherwise. You didn't manipulate the truth. You made it undeniable. And that's something they can't undo. This is why they're questioning everything now. If they were wrong about you, someone they were so sure they had pegged, what else have they been wrong about? Who else have they misjudged? Which facts in their life are actually just stories dressed up as reality? This kind of mental spiral doesn't have an off switch. It eats at them because the very foundations of their thinking are now unstable. What really stings is that you didn't just challenge their opinion, you rewrote the framework they thought governed the truth. And once someone sees the cracks in their own reality, they can't unsee them. Every assumption now feels suspicious. Every belief now feels flimsy. They can pretend to be fine on the outside, but inside they're navigating a mental earthquake you triggered without even lifting your voice. Number 3, you took away their favorite excuse without saying a word. For years they've leaned on a comfortable narrative to explain your success, that you had some hidden advantage, that luck fell into your lap, that someone somewhere was pulling strings for you. It was their way of protecting themselves from facing the truth that you worked for what you have, that you endured what they couldn't survive, and that you showed up when they hid. That excuse was their safety blanket. Without it, they'd have to admit they've been avoiding the very effort and courage it takes to build something real. Then you did something so undeniable, so rooted in skill and discipline, that it stripped away every hiding place they had. No amount of spinning the story could make it look like luck this time. It was pure ability, resilience, and timing, the kind you can't fake, buy, or inherit. And suddenly, their favorite explanation collapsed. They couldn't say you got it easy. They couldn't say it was handed to you. They had to confront the fact that you earned it, and that truth hits harder than anything else. The sting comes from what that realization forces them to see in themselves. If your win was pure merit, then what's their excuse? If you climbed without a ladder, then why are they still standing at the bottom? Your achievement became a mirror, and that reflection isn't flattering. It shows the late starts they never took, the risks they avoided, the hours they never put in. It exposes that their limitations weren't imposed by the world. They were self-imposed. They may try to downplay it publicly, but privately, it's eating at them. The gap between what you've done and what they've done can't be explained away anymore. It's not a matter of different opportunities or unfair advantages. It's a matter of will, focus, and consistency. That's the one comparison they can't win, because it requires work they weren't willing to do. And now, every time they see you succeed, they'll feel that quiet ache of knowing they could have tried harder but didn't. You didn't just take away their excuse. You took away their ability to hide from themselves. And that's a wound that doesn't heal quickly, no matter how hard they pretend otherwise. Number 4. You made their efforts look like stall tactics. They've been parading their grind for years. Long hours, endless meetings, constant projects in the works. On the surface, it looked like progress, but in reality, most of it was motion without direction. Then you came along and, in a single decisive move, achieved what all their tireless effort couldn't touch. It was a shock to their system. Suddenly, their work ethic doesn't look like commitment anymore. It looks like a well-disguised way to avoid actually producing results. What cuts deepest is the speed and clarity of what you did. You didn't need years of back and forth. You didn't need the perfect conditions. You didn't wait for everyone to agree. You identified the goal, acted with precision, and delivered an outcome they couldn't ignore. In contrast, their routines now look suspiciously like stalling. the kind of busy work that gives the illusion of momentum while keeping real change just out of reach. This isn't just about embarrassment, it's about exposure. You revealed the gap between activity and achievement, and it's a gap they've been hiding in for a long time. Their hard work was safe. It allowed them to say they were on it without ever having to risk failure. Your move showed that true progress requires risk, decisiveness, and a willingness to disrupt comfort zones, all the things they've been avoiding. Now they're forced to reckon with the truth. They've been circling the same starting point while convincing themselves they were moving forward. And the worst part? Other people see it too. Colleagues, peers, even their quiet supporters. They can all tell the difference between your tangible results and their endless preparation cycles. The comparison isn't flattering, and no amount of spin can make it look otherwise. Deep down, they know they've been delaying under the guise of diligence. And now, with your example in front of them, they can't unsee it. Every future task they take on will be haunted by the unspoken question: am I actually moving forward? Or am I just keeping busy so I don't have to face what I'm afraid to start? That's the uncomfortable truth your action forced into the light, and it's not one they'll be able to forget anytime soon. Number 5, you proved mastery was possible without their approval. For a long time they moved like they were the keepers of the keys. If you wanted recognition, resources, or a seat at the table, you had to go through them. They built their identity around being the gatekeepers, the ones who decided who was worthy and who wasn't. The problem for them is, you just showed that their gates were never the only way in. In fact, you proved you didn't need their path at all. Your success wasn't stamped with their approval, and that's what makes it sting. You didn't ask for permission, you didn't wait for an invitation, and you didn't beg for validation. You built something so undeniable that it bypassed their entire process. They were prepared to deny you access. But you created your own platform, your own audience, your own leverage, and it worked. That shakes their sense of power to its core, because it means the control they thought they had was only ever an illusion. Now, they're forced to face an uncomfortable reality. If authority can be earned directly from results, their role as the deciders becomes irrelevant. They can't discredit what you've accomplished without looking bitter or out of touch, and they can't claim credit for it because they had nothing to do with it. Every time your name comes up, it's a reminder that someone they didn't choose managed to rise anyway. This threatens more than just their ego. It threatens their entire system. Gatekeeping only works when people believe there's no other way to succeed. You've just proven there is. That changes the mindset of everyone watching. Others who felt blocked or overlooked now see a different route, and that's the kind of ripple effect they can't control. The worst part for them is that they can't shut your path down. They can't revoke your credentials, because your credentials are results. They can't bar you from your own table. You've shown that real mastery isn't something handed over. It's something built, and once it exists, it doesn't need anyone's approval to stand tall. That's a truth they can't undo, no matter how much they wish they could. Number 6, you operated in silence until the outcome was irreversible. You moved in a way that didn't announce itself, didn't broadcast progress, and didn't leave breadcrumbs for them to follow. While they were busy watching for obvious moves and open battles, you were building quietly, far away from their reach. Every decision, every step forward was taken without fanfare, not because you lacked confidence, but because you understood that silence is the safest shield against interference. By the time they caught wind of what you were doing, it wasn't in progress anymore. It was finished. That's what unsettles them most, the finality of it. There's no chance to stall you, no opportunity to twist the narrative, no space to throw roadblocks in your path. They didn't just lose control over the outcome, they never even got the chance to enter the game. And that kind of power isn't loud, but it's devastating. It proves you don't have to fight publicly to win decisively. They're used to being able to sense when someone is about to make a big move. They rely on whispers, rumors, and subtle cues so they can counteract it early. But you gave them nothing. No hints, no warnings, not even a shadow of your plan. That's why your success feels like it hit them out of nowhere. They weren't just unprepared, they were blindsided. And when people are blindsided, the first reaction isn't strategy, it's panic. Now they're replaying everything, wondering how you managed to keep it under wraps for so long. They're questioning who knew, how you worked around them, and why they never saw the signs. The truth is, you didn't need to hide. You just didn't owe them visibility. You chose to protect your progress until it couldn't be stopped, and that's a level of control they can't match. The fact that the outcome is now irreversible is the real blow. They can't undo it, can't outshine it, and can't bury it without looking desperate. Your name is already attached to the achievement, and history doesn't give out erasers. Every time they see the results, it's a reminder that while they were watching for a fight, you were quietly winning the war. That's the kind of move that changes how they see you forever, and how they'll never feel safe underestimating you again. Number 7, you disproved the myth that everyone's replaceable. They told themselves a story to feel secure, that no one is truly essential, that if you were gone, things would go on just fine. It was a neat little myth that made them believe they held the power, that they could discard anyone without consequence. You just proved how wrong they were. When you made your move, it became obvious you weren't just a small part of the machine. You were the point everything turned on. Without you, the whole structure didn't just slow down, it buckled. The truth hit them harder than they expected because it wasn't theoretical anymore. They saw in real time that there are roles people fill that can't be duplicated. It's not just about skills. It's about the unique combination of insight, execution, timing, and influence that you bring. That's the kind of presence you can't plug in a replacement for. They could try to fill the gap, but the outcome is never the same. And now they know it. What unsettles them most is how invisible that truth was until it revealed itself. They didn't realize the extent of your influence because you carried it without constantly demanding recognition. Your absence or your shift in direction was the proof they didn't know they'd have to face. And the longer they tried to pretend it didn't matter, the more obvious the cracks became. Now, every misstep, every delay, every drop in quality screams that you were the stabilizing force all along. They can't spin it without admitting they're struggling, and they can't hide it because the results speak louder than anything they could say. That's why this particular truth hurts so much. It forces them to acknowledge that their safety net was actually you. They can try to downplay it, but deep down, they know they depended on you far more than they ever admitted. And the scariest part for them, once someone proves they're irreplaceable, it changes the balance of power permanently. They can't threaten you with being easily replaced anymore, because you've already shown that when you step out, the whole operation doesn't just wobble. It falls apart. That's a fact they'll never be able to unlearn, no matter how hard they try to bury it. Number 8. You forced them to see that their control was an illusion. They moved with the confidence of people who believed they had you figured out. In their minds, they knew your limits, they knew your next step before you took it, and they knew how to block any path you tried to take. That sense of control made them feel untouchable. But what they didn't realize is that control only works if the other person plays along. The moment you stopped playing by their rules, their grip slipped. And with your latest action, it shattered completely. They had built their strategies around predictable patterns, assuming you would keep reacting within the boundaries they set. You were supposed to wait for their approval, operate within the resources they allowed, and think inside the frame they built for you. But you took that frame, stepped over it, and showed that you could create opportunities outside their reach. That's when they realized the uncomfortable truth. Their control was never absolute, it was conditional. And the condition was your cooperation. Now they're left questioning how much of their so-called authority was real and how much was an illusion they maintained by making people believe there were no other options. You exposed that the walls they built around you weren't impenetrable fortresses. They were just fences with open gates. Once you walked out, they couldn't stop you, and that reality hits harder than anything else you could have done. What's even worse for them is that other people saw it too. Those who once feared their control now see that it can be bypassed, and that shifts the entire power dynamic. You didn't just free yourself, you cracked the illusion for everyone watching. And once an illusion is broken, it can't be rebuilt with the same strength. They can try to reassert authority, but deep down, they know it will never feel as solid as it did before. You proved that no matter how much someone tries to dictate your path, it only works if you agree to walk it. And the day you stop agreeing, the day you decide to move differently, they lose every ounce of control they thought they had. That's a truth they'll never be able to forget. And it's one they'll never forgive you for showing so clearly. Number 9. You revealed. They've been underestimating you for years. They've spent years operating on a false picture of you, one they were happy to believe because it made them feel bigger, smarter, and more secure. They thought they had your measure, that they knew your limits, that they could predict how far you'd go and how much you could handle, and you never rushed to correct them. You let them keep that comfortable version in their heads, not because you lacked strength, but because you understood the value of being underestimated. Their arrogance became your cover. The more they believed you were harmless or predictable, the less they prepared for the reality of your capability. They stopped watching closely. They stopped taking you seriously. They left openings they never would have left if they knew what you were truly capable of. That's the mistake they can't undo now. When you finally made your move, it wasn't just a surprise. It was a revelation. The gap between who they thought you were and who you actually are wasn't a small step. It was a chasm. And they're standing on the wrong side of it, staring across, realizing there's no way to bridge it anymore. What unsettles them most is that this wasn't a sudden transformation. You didn't become powerful overnight. You've been this capable all along. They just never noticed because they were too busy looking down on you to look closely at you. Now they have to confront the uncomfortable fact that their underestimation was their own weakness, not yours. They weren't outsmarting you. You were outweighting them. You were quietly building, learning, and preparing while they were distracted by their own inflated sense of control. The result? You were ready when they weren't, and by the time they realized it, it was too late. The worst part for them is knowing this will never happen again, because they'll never feel safe underestimating you now. But the damage is already done. They've lost the element of surprise forever. They've learned the hard way that arrogance blinds, and that you were never small to begin with. You just let them believe you were until it suited you to show the truth. And that truth is far bigger than they can comfortably handle. Number 10, you proved vision beats resources every time. They had everything people are told they need to succeed. The right contacts, deep pockets, and influential backing. On paper, that should have made them unbeatable. But when it came down to it, all those advantages couldn't produce what you managed to create. That's because resources without vision are just raw materials with no blueprint. And you didn't just have a plan, you had clarity, focus, and the kind of insight that can't be bought or handed over. Your move proved that money can open doors, but vision builds the house. They could fund endless projects, hire the best talent, and pull every string they had access to, yet still fall short. Why? Because they were chasing outcomes without truly understanding the path to get there. They were relying on abundance to make up for a lack of direction, thinking more fuel could compensate for not knowing where the engine was supposed to go. You showed them it doesn't work like that. What hits them hardest is that vision multiplies the value of any resource, while resources without vision waste themselves into nothing. You took less and made more. You moved smarter, not louder. You leveraged timing, strategy, and purpose. Three things that can't be purchased, no matter how much money someone throws around. And the result was something so distinct, so impactful, that they can't replicate it without also replicating the way you think. That's the part they can't copy. Now they're left in a frustrating place. They can outspend you, but they can't outthink you. They can't buy the ability to see possibilities where others see limits. They can't purchase the instinct to know when to move, when to hold back, and when to strike. And the more they try to use their resources to catch up, the more obvious it becomes that they're following a vision that isn't theirs. And it shows. The real damage you've done is this. You've shifted the measure of power. It's no longer about who has the most. It's about who can do the most with what they have. And in that equation, you've already won. They can't control the narrative anymore, because every result you produce is living proof that strategy will always outrun spending. Number 11. You turned their quiet observers into secret supporters. They always thought they had the crowd on lock. That silence meant allegiance, and the lack of open challenge meant everyone was on their side. What they never realized is that silence often hides curiosity, doubt, or even quiet admiration. People were watching you, not just for what you were doing, but for how you were doing it. And when you made your move, that sharp, unapologetic, outcome-driven move, something shifted. The same quiet observers who used to nod along with them are now replaying your actions in their minds and asking themselves, wait, why wasn't that the person we were following all along? Your boldness didn't just ruffle feathers, it rewrote the room's power map. It made people realize that authority isn't just about position or tenure. It's about capability, courage, and consistency. And the moment you displayed those things in a way they couldn't ignore, the power dynamic they'd been leaning on started to tilt in your direction. These observers may not be ready to declare their support out loud, yet, but in their minds, they're no longer convinced your opposition has the upper hand. For some, it's not even about liking you more. It's about recognizing that results speak louder than allegiance to a failing leader. They've been watching your opposition spin their wheels, avoid decisive moves, and cover insecurities with empty displays of control. Then they watched you cut straight through the noise and achieve something they'd been promising for years but never delivered. That's not just impressive, it's destabilizing to the loyalties they've built. And here's where it gets even more unsettling for your opposition. Once people start questioning loyalty, it rarely stops there. Doubt spreads quietly, but relentlessly. Those loyal allies begin withholding information, delaying responses, and hesitating to follow orders. They start talking differently in private. They pay more attention to your wins. Before your opposition even realizes what's happening, their circle of influence has hairline cracks running through it. Cracks that widen every time you succeed again. You didn't just win over supporters, you disrupted the gravitational pull of their authority. Now they're fighting an invisible battle for loyalty that they might have already lost. And the scariest part for them? You didn't have to recruit anyone. You just had to be undeniable. Number 12. You showed that progress doesn't need their timeline. They were married to the idea that change had to be a carefully scheduled, neatly packaged process, the kind they could track, monitor, and most importantly, control. In their minds, progress was a staircase that everyone climbed at the same pace, with them deciding when you were allowed to take the next step. They believed that nothing significant could happen without their notice, their blessing, and their carefully crafted timeline. Then you came along and ripped that idea apart in a single move. You didn't just take a step forward, you skipped entire floors, bypassing years of their necessary stages and processes. You forced them to confront something they never wanted to admit, that all their talk of patience, preparation, and procedure wasn't always about doing things right. It was often about keeping things slow enough to maintain control. Your leap was proof that speed and quality aren't enemies, and that sometimes the only thing holding progress back is the people pretending to manage it. It's not that they don't understand rapid change. They fear it. Slow progress gives them time to adjust, manipulate, and prepare their defenses. Instant change leaves them exposed. It strips them of the chance to discredit you before the results are undeniable. And that's exactly what you did. You moved so fast that by the time they noticed, the conversation had already shifted, and the reality they were trying to avoid had already arrived. Your move didn't just prove that progress can be quick, it showed that their timeline was never the only one that mattered. It dismantled their authority over pace and sequence, and it forced them to realize that transformation doesn't need a gatekeeper's schedule. In their eyes, you've broken some unspoken rule, but in truth, all you did was remind everyone else that growth, innovation, and breakthroughs don't have to wait for permission. Now, they're stuck playing catch-up to a change they never planned for, one that doesn't follow their calendar, their comfort zone, or their need to feel in control. And the most unsettling part for them is knowing that if you did it once, you can do it again, anytime you choose, without warning. Number 13, you made them realize they've been training for the wrong fight. They had been sharpening their skills, refining their tactics, and rehearsing their strategies, but all within the narrow arena they understood. Their preparation was intense, but it was also predictable, based on the assumption that the battle ahead would follow rules they recognized and terrain they could map. In their minds, the fight was going to be a test of familiar strengths. Who had the better network, the stronger reputation, or the more polished presentation? They thought they knew exactly what it would take to win, because they assumed you were training for the same fight they were. The problem for them is that your training didn't happen under the same lights or within the same boundaries. You weren't conditioning yourself for a match in their ring. You were preparing for a war they had no blueprint for, while they were studying competitors they considered worthy rivals. You were studying the systems, the psychology, and the underlying power structures that determine the outcome before the first move is even made. They were preparing for an opponent. You were preparing for an entire landscape. When you showed up and dominated, it wasn't just that you were better, it was that you were operating on an entirely different set of principles. They were swinging for points in a game. You were dismantling the entire scoreboard. They had trained themselves to think in terms of matchups, hierarchies, and incremental wins. You came in with strategies that bypassed those steps entirely. Strategies that didn't just aim to win. They aimed to make their version of the game irrelevant. This is why your success rattled them so deeply. It's one thing to lose to someone playing the same sport. It's another to realize you've spent years mastering the wrong one. They now have to face the fact that their preparation wasn't inadequate. It was misaligned. And that's a much harder pill to swallow because it means their instincts about what mattered, what was worth their time, and what would protect their position have been wrong for years. You didn't just beat them. You revealed that the battlefield they thought was the center of everything was just a fraction of the real war, and you've already claimed territory they didn't even know existed until it was too late. Number 14, you forced them into self-reflection they can't escape from. Your boldness didn't just shift the way they measure you. It rewrote the way they measure themselves. When you made your move, it wasn't simply an achievement for others to applaud or a victory to note. It was a direct, unavoidable reminder of what they could have done, but didn't. Suddenly, their past decisions are no longer just practical or safe. They're exposed as moments of hesitation, fear, or complacency. You didn't have to say a single word to point this out. Your action became a mirror they can't stop looking into. The hardest part for them isn't even accepting your success. It's reckoning with what your success says about them. They can't brush it off as luck because they saw the work and intent behind it. They can't dismiss it as a fluke because it's too precise and too consistent. And they can't comfort themselves with the idea that you just had better circumstances because they know you often had less to work with than they did. That's why the reflection is so brutal. It's not a comparison between equals on the same path. It's a comparison between what you dared to do and what they refused to risk. Now they're left replaying their own turning points. The times they stalled when they should have leapt. The opportunities they let pass because they were waiting for perfect conditions. The moments they played small to fit in with the crowd. They're realizing that while they were avoiding mistakes, they were also avoiding growth. And you, by contrast, were moving, imperfectly at times, but always forward. What's worse for them is that this kind of mirror doesn't fade. Every time they see you take another step, it forces them to measure it against their own inaction. Every new success you achieve is like a spotlight on a shadow in their own history. It's not jealousy they're wrestling with. It's the quiet ache of knowing they could have been more sooner if they had the courage to do what you did. And so, without meaning to, you've put them in the most uncomfortable position of all, living with the awareness that the only thing holding them back all along was themselves. And now they know it. What you've done goes far beyond a single victory. You didn't just surprise them, outmaneuver them, or rise above their expectations. You fundamentally shifted the rules they thought governed reality. You proved that authority isn't given, it's claimed. That mastery doesn't need approval. That vision outweighs resources, and that decisive action always eclipses endless preparation. Every move you made dismantled their assumptions, exposed their blind spots, and revealed truths they couldn't unsee. They've been forced into a reckoning with themselves, questioning their strategies, their timelines, and even their own sense of control. Quiet observers became supporters. False myths about replaceability were shattered. The idea that success must follow their pace was obliterated. You operated in silence until the outcome was irreversible, leaving them scrambling to catch up while you were already setting the next benchmark. Every hesitation they took, every safety they clung to, and every underestimation they made was a gift you turned into proof of your extraordinary capacity. What makes this even more remarkable is that none of it relied on permission, approval, or their acknowledgement. Your results speak louder than their narratives ever could. They can argue, rationalize, and rewrite the story in their heads. But the reality remains, you moved where they couldn't follow, achieved what they couldn't reach, and forced them to confront their own limitations without even trying to. This isn't just a win for you. It's a revelation for everyone watching. It's proof that true power, influence, and impact come from clarity, courage, and relentless action. You've shown that the path forward doesn't need approval, that boldness commands respect, and that those who underestimate you do so at their own peril. So take this moment in stride, because what you've accomplished isn't just a temporary victory. It's a permanent shift in perception, a recalibration of expectations, and a masterclass in proving that the impossible is simply the unattempted. They weren't ready for you, and now no one ever will be, at least not on your terms. If this video hit you with the kind of truth that makes you stop and think, don't just watch, be part of the movement. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a moment of insight and power. Smash the like button if this resonated with you, and drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or experiences. We want to hear how this truth is shaking your world. And don't keep this to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to see just how unstoppable real boldness can be. Every action you take here helps build a community that refuses to settle for ordinary. Step in, speak up, and be counted. God bless you.